Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, where we explore the cutting edge of insurtech and digital innovation in the insurance industry. I'm your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, and today we are diving into the crucial topic of finding new growth in the Australian insurance landscape. And I am thrilled to be able to have a two-part discussion with an incredibly special guest that I've known for a little while now, and I'm very grateful that we've got some of his time to come onto the pod today. Troy Barnes is one of the few people you can say, I think, that's a true leader in this kind of transformational change across the industry. He's had a career that spanned geographies, spanned industries, and he's got a really unique, I should say, kind of blend of strategic insight, deep technology acumen, and leadership at the highest level has been some of the biggest insurers globally. And so we are super blessed to have him and to go really deep into insurance transformation, digital experience, all the experience that Troy's had over all of his career to date. And why is that important? Why do we want to drag Troy here for this two-part episode? He's got this really unique perspective on finding new growth, and I cannot wait to get deep into it. In part one, we'll explore why the Australian industry has stagnated, and that question is purposefully provocative because trying to deep dive into it and understand the reasons why. Like, why has there been stagnation in digital transformation? Why has the growth not occurred? And what are the kind of strategies that can be kind of implemented to help the industry get out of this trough that we're in today? So, Troy, thanks for your time, mate. Really great to have you, and I'm really excited about the conversation.
No, thanks, Nigel. And you'll have to remind me to write my cover letter for any future employment opportunities because you've just basically smashed it out of the park.
You are welcome. I'm here for a fee. I think these conversations really start really well. First, to understand a bit about the person, understand a bit about you. And I think a framing here, it'd be great to understand your early years, like what kind of were the things that made Troy? Like, what did your parents and teachers say about you in terms of you as a human? And then how does that kind of evolve into you being your career in terms of it took you into the insurance industry? And then we can dive further into the story after that.
Obviously, I'm Australian, sort of spent time growing up both country and city areas. Did the usual thing, went through school, through the normal paths, went through and left school. Actually played rugby league when I was in early teens and 20s, so I'm a Rabbitoh for anyone that's a South Sydney supporter out there, and I still am to this very day. And then sort of moved around different industries, I guess. It was really on an exploration in my younger age, and I was married quite young. I got married at 20. I'm still on my journey to celebrating 27 years of that now. 3 kids, got all that done really early. So had to sort of kickstart the professional career, particularly when South got kicked out of the comp in 99. That was sort of my impetus to make a decision to, rugby league or any type of professional sport has probably got a lifespan of 10 or 15, if you like, 10 or 15 years, if you're lucky enough. And sort of pivoted at that point and sort of grew my own professional career, in Australia, more or less in technology, in a range of industries, and was always I'm a curious person by nature. I'm a competitive person by nature, corporate and sports. I love going out there to do things that are not done, getting into new territory, and that sort of permeated my entire career to where I am today. And got to a point where I joined ING in Australia. Had some fun there for a couple of years and pursued the opportunity to go overseas. Why not? We were in, at that stage, ING was a massive company, 100 plus countries and whatever else. And there was an opportunity to step out and test the water overseas. And I was, blessed and supported by my boss in Australia, and also the Australian CEO who was in Taiwan at the time, actually, to bring me over and get work done there. And through that, I sort of left the tech function, if you will, in organizations and moved over to the business side, but sort of always carried the tech close with me, sort of the card in the back pocket, if you will, just to make sure as things evolved and you're solving problems, that was always there, and you kept that capability growing and learning. So, and I think through the start of that, I'm now in Singapore 17 and a half years later. I've had a lot of opportunities with the insurance industry, both regionally and locally. This is the 6th country I've lived in. I've managed to keep in contact with the Australian market in different roles as well, and friends and family that I've got back there, and we've got our home is still in Sydney. But I guess in a nutshell, I've always been curious. I've always looked at improving things and bettering things, and that sort of sits under the transformation role in various job titles, of course, that I've been around in the last 17 or so years, and tried to bring things together with teams. Like for me, coming from a team sport, I've always tried to bring that into the corporate space. I think there's nothing better and nothing more enjoyable on a daily basis when you've got the team around you and you're all hunting after the same outcome. You've got each other's backs, and no matter how difficult or challenging the environment is around you, it's just so much more fun when everyone's on the same page and you build, your own capabilities, you learn and grow yourself, and you do that with the team that you're building up as well to drive high performance. So, that's really been, and I know that's an oversimplified version. I will say one more thing. I did step out of insurance when I first came to Singapore as a bit of a mid-career test. Yeah, and I spent 2.5 years with Yum, specifically the Pizza Hut brand, in an APAC Chief Customer and Digital Experience role. And it was great. It was sort of a
What were the differences, Troy? So jump in. I'm really interested to jump in there. What did you see? Like, obviously, you saw insurance, and then you went essentially to retail, or like fast-moving consumer goods. However you want to kind of frame that. What were the differences?
Yeah, great question. Look, on the first front, I would say I was pleasantly surprised by the transferability. I just left a huge role in Malaysia where I was the chief CX officer, but basically customer operations, digital was sort of part of that remit, where I had like 1,000 staff with 40 branches, massive play, but really anchored the customer front and center in everything we did. And that was a way of bringing the culture around that sort of true north, if you will. I was pleasantly surprised that helped me a lot when I moved into a completely new industry. Obviously, in a consumer-facing role in everything that they do, there was this very little back office and all that kind of stuff that you see in the FSI space or financial services. But learned an incredible lot and had probably the best onboarding experience I've ever had with a company. Yum is pretty much 100% franchised, and what that means is if you're in regional roles, you've got to do that stakeholder influencing management, convincing local CEOs to bring change. Well, in this space, it's not a local CEO in the same brand. You're now dealing with other companies who have the brand. So there's a lot more effort and work to build those relationships. And I definitely didn't get them all right. I had some certainly better than others. But the onboarding experience to help me build credit, and my boss at the time sent me to the UK to basically do everything in a Pizza Hut store from the ground up, sweeping the corners, rolling dough, prepping the vegetables, cooking pizza, serving, doing calls, doing 6 to 7 hour food safety audits, everything you can imagine that happens in a dine-in store, a delivery or a takeaway outlet for the Pizza Hut brand. I was put through my paces for 30 consecutive days, 10 or 12 hours a day. And it was amazing because then at least when I stepped back into my role here at Singapore and then went about how can I help the brand grow, I had that behind me. So the conversations were far better and far easier. So it's something that I've taken with me, actually. I think any organisation that's bringing someone outside the industry in, take the time, give them 2 or 4 weeks, in the insurance space, let them shadow advisors or agents, depending on where your market is. Sit down with your product teams and everything else. Get a real breast of what are we about? What makes this thing work? Because that investment up front, it helped me accelerate actually being able to add value. So brilliant. So anyway, that was my little mid-career test.
Absolutely love it. What I think you just brought to life exactly what I framed up right at the start of the call in terms of this enormous breadth that you have from industry, geography, and kind of value chain. And so I think that frames this provocative question. Why, Troy, why has the Australian industry stagnated?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And let me preface it with saying, I think the insurance industry has a very unique ability to make a lifelong impact to any person. You know, it's one of the rare industries where the products by nature can serve people over decades. You can buy one at 20 and still have it when you're 80 or 70 or whatever it may be. And there's a life that you change along all of that. So I think there's absolutely something that makes insurance different to every other industry in the world. But I think there's also, with that comes a number of responsibilities and challenges to stand up and live to that. To your point around the market, I think if you look at, again, there'll be debates on this one because depending on what metric you look at, and there's plenty of them, there will be some arguments on, no, we're doing okay over here. But I think broadly on the customer side of things, certainly what's shaken up the industry in Australia was the Royal Commission that was done 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the $64 million question is what's materially changed in that space?
You know, I reckon it might be, sorry to interrupt, I reckon it might be more than $64 million, Troy. I reckon it might be a few billion. I think we're definitely in the billions. We're definitely not in the millions.
Absolutely. But I mean, I think the quintessential purpose and reason for insurance being there for consumers is trust. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're there to protect people. That's why they pay premiums to have a product and or policy with you. And that trust is what's got to stand tall when people want to put their hard-earned into their premiums and have a policy that hopefully is there in those days, God forbid, when you need them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's come under question. Well, it clearly has. And I think now you're in a situation where you've got high inflation. You know, these are things everybody knows. Cost of living's gone up. People are genuinely struggling, you know, and insurance, particularly the life insurance side of things, is a nice to have thing in your life. Unfortunately, I don't think it is. I think there's many practitioners out there who would argue that as well. But consumers will look at it that way. You know, if that 1% chance of something going wrong in my future life does happen, then I'll take one for the team. You know, as opposed to looking at my cash flow and my pay packet and then going, do I put my $50 a week into that policy to cover that 10, 20 or more years down the track? So I think there's definitely some work in that space that needs to be done, and to counter all of those things that come out. I mean, if you look at the situation today, I've seen articles recently where the people up in northern New South Wales, southern Queensland, who've suffered from floods, who don't have homes, still can't get claims paid. You know, I'm like, you know, what do we stand for here? Then there's promises around, you know, I've seen other articles around multi-policy discounts that don't get fulfilled, or a loyalty discount that actually doesn't really materialise. So I think when you come back to the core, how do we emphasise that concept of trust so that when you talk to any consumer out in the street, and I think there's also more to be done there. Consumers are the lifeblood of any industry, right? You grow because you get more consumers, and the ones that you've got, you keep longer. You get those two ingredients right, you grow. Everything else becomes details.
When you think about, sorry to interrupt this, Troy, when you think about stagnation and that word, there's obviously multiple parts of this, which is technology stagnation, product innovation stagnation, just net premium growth, culture, people. Obviously, there's loads of different verticals. Is there any that you think specifically have stalled more than others, or do you think some are like specific drivers for maybe some of this lack of trust that you're kind of calling out?
Yeah, look, 100%. I think if you look at the demographics of Australia specifically today, insurance has always been a slow-moving industry, let's be honest. I mean, that's not unique to Australia, it's worldwide. But if you look at the demographics in Australia, you've got, you know, let's say from an ageing population point of view, you've got about 30 to 40% of people who are, in the next 20 years, are going to be retired or to the back end of their lifespan. That's a enormous toll on the economy, on health and care services, the drain on assets that will obviously need to fulfill their daily needs. But the compensation for that, I think, is where the huge gap is, and also the huge opportunity. So let's look at that 21 to 35 year age group. Now that at the moment in Australia is about 22 plus or minus % of the population. What's the penetration rate there? How have we made the insurance products relevant to that section of the community? Because if we don't, then that drain and that dependency that's up in the elder end is going to really have a catastrophic effect in so many ways, economically, as well as in the corporate and personal spaces. And I was looking at some data early this morning. In Australia, the birth rates have been declining and the death rates have been increasing last 3 or 4 years. That also is going to have a material impact to the outcomes of that. So I think this is where insurers might need to take a more proactive role. You know, insurance is typically being seen, and this is more a consumer perception, as a reactive industry. You're there when I need you. How often do I engage an insurer? Stats have shown that 2 to 3 times a year, a consumer will interact with their insurer, whether it's a life or non-life insurers. It will sit between that number. How do you increase that? You know, if you look at that younger age group, you know, that's high frequency, high engagement, social media, digital natives, you know, all these terms are being tossed around. There's a massive role that insurers can play in that space, have a real impact, bring their products and services to be genuinely relevant, and put it in a position where insurance can be bought, not sold. That's a bit of a traditional term, but I think that will come from making them more appealing to that demographic of the population in Australia. It's a massive uplift in there, but it needs a sense of urgency, I think, because at the moment it's not quite there yet.
And that sense of urgency and kind of how you framed that up just then was what that cohort of customers interact with on their daily lives outside of their insurance worlds, whether that's e-commerce, whether that's banking, whether that's kind of all the other worlds they interact with daily. Like the experiences are vastly different to a lot of the insurance experiences they have. And that kind of leads us into something you've been deep in for a very long time, which is insurance digital transformation. And there's a lot of myths here. There's a lot of things that are true and there's a lot of myths. I'm interested in your view. Like, can you bust any of the myths of why insurers can't carry out digital transformation because of legacy tech? Like, I want to know, like, why is it? What are the myths? How can we bust them?
Yeah, so I think I've spent and been given the opportunity to really go after those kind of questions, Nigel, in the last sort of 3+ years, although I've had elements of it in previous times. A few things stand out for me. Number one is insurance can be simplified. It has to be simplified. Most people don't understand it. And that's, some of them are inside the industry, let alone the ones outside who are going to buy the products and services. I think technologically, you need to challenge the complexity in your environments and go at it with full force. I've been fortunate enough to build a couple of platforms up in the Asia markets where we've scaled out across a number of countries, a number of languages, and been able to rip out all the complexity that sits in typically in the insurance environment technically. That's number one. And you really need to think of it with a customer lens, right?
How did you do that, Troy? Because everyone says it's impossible. Every exec that I speak to, every exec I speak to says we're on a 15-year transformation and we're implementing PAS X. We can't do anything because there's too much change going on in the business. How did you get around that? What's the myths that you busted?
Yeah, great question. I have a mantra around 3 things. You know, think big, start small, scale fast. That's always underpinned how I approach transformation. Look at everything from a value perspective. You know, over the years of my early transformation time, I was running lean programs. across different markets, building those capabilities in different countries. And lean professes one thing, the elimination of waste. The definition of waste is from a customer point of view, does it add a dollar value to the cost of the product or service you're charging me for? And if it doesn't, and from a company point of view, if it doesn't explicitly make your operation more safer, less risk, then get rid of it. You have to go in there with that kind of mindset first. And for me, that the Mr. Breaking the myths is a mindset thing. It's not a capability thing at this stage. How do we do it? We decoupled. Okay, two things for me that I think we were able to prove successfully in multiple countries, and I'll talk about ones that are even more risk adverse than the Australian markets and regulations down there. The first thing is your consumers are on this. That's my 3 kids, by the way. In Australia, 85% of people between 16 and 64 have a smartphone. If you're going to be relevant with consumers, you've got to be where they are. But what that doesn't mean is you start dumping these downloadable PDFs, which end up having to be printed, or have a website and a web page which requires you to phone call or send an email to someone. You've just introduced friction, forget it. If you're going to be on the smartphone or if you're going to be digital, then look at the journey digitally end to end. And this requires a whole rethink. Number 2, the legacy systems prevail in every insurer that I've worked with or spoken to with friends around all the industries and regardless of business line. You need to decouple. Okay. If you start to create this interwoven set of points and building these layers in your tech stack to try and drive one outcome, the ability for a consumer to transact simply and easily, you're contradicting yourself. You need to get rid of all of the middle mess. So one of the things we were able to do is say, if your administration system for most insurers is where what they refer to as the source of truth or the source of record, leave it there. Okay, unless there is a catastrophic need to evolve it, and I've yet to talk to any insurer who said that other than ones who are unfortunately still sitting on a bit of a mainframe environment, then rethink your tech and digital approach to work with it. And that's what we did. So, bringing services to be able to work in a automated journey as a customer experience is not how we think about it inside the office, can happen in a couple of weeks. If you want to automate the claims process, and one of the things I'm super proud of in the industry, I'm actually going to talk at a conference in Hong Kong in a couple of weeks. You can pay a claim in a few seconds. Now, when I say you can pay a claim, can pay a claim in a few seconds, that means if the customer is looking to have their claim reimbursed from a GP or hospital or a clinic, or whatever it is he or she has been succumbed to, then they can scan it, use the right technologies and integrations to take that all the way through to the rules, the decisions, or the information and the data that you need to make an accurate decision, considering the risk, fraud prevention and the likes as well. They can all be integrated into this journey, but the customer doesn't need to see that. To where the outcome can be, congratulations, Nigel, we've just approved your claim and we've just put the 350 Australian dollars into your bank account. And at that time, you've seen that screen, the little pop down comes from the top. It says, please note that insurer has just deposited $350 into your bank. We built that in 3 countries. And it's now available to consumers. And that happens 24/7. That's not dependent on the traditional office hours. Again, if you're going to be digital isn't an office hours constraint. It's a always on, always available, and experience should be consistently useful to customers all around the clock.
Yeah. When you that's obviously the end goal there, Troy, which is like phenomenal, right? I'm sure a bunch of PMs listening to this will be like, that's what I want to give to our customers. But you spoke there about the start of that, which was the simple decoupling, and kind of what we find in a bunch of conversations we have is that vision feels often too big. And executives get frozen in terms of like making steps towards that kind of goal. So how did you approach like the small slithers of value have this decoupling to prove value along the path to get to there. Like, can you talk about how you framed it? I'm sure you had to sell it into boards and execs of like you taking that path. Like, love to hear about how you kind of went down that path.
Yeah, so I'll talk to 2 points on this one. One is the approach. So in the role that I was in most recently was regional. So for me to get access to be able to build this in country, I need to sit down with the CEO. And I've learned over the years through the mistakes I've made and some successes along that way that if you're going to get the CEO convinced on allowing you to build something for him or her in their markets, then first thing you need to do is you need to have a commercially compelling proposition.
Mm-hmm.
By doing this, this is going to be a direct impact to your P&L on a positive basis, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, what I found is that certain markets, obviously, and even as an industry, insurance struggles to retain those high demand skills. You know,
Mm-hmm.
your digital, your full stack developers, you know, AI engineers or data engineers, architects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we took that risk and that concern away and said, look, we've got a central group where we believe that ability to retain world-class talent, we'll take that on and we'll manage that. That means you get the best of both worlds. You get something that is commercially compelling, is going to have a direct impact positively to your P&L, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll bring best-of-breed talent from either internally or the partners that we've brought on board to build that for you. The third benefit to him or her as a CEO was, oh, and by the way, if you want some of your local teams to develop and build those skills which you don't have at the moment, bring them in the pot and we'll take them along the journey. So then there's a win-win on both sides there. So that was in terms of actually getting the door open so we could get it done.
Yep.
The second thing is here, and I'm going to touch on something a little controversial. You've probably heard the word agile thrown around like fairy floss all the time, right? We were very emphatic about if we say it, we do it. Now, Agile set of 12 principles that came up 23 years ago. It's the framework that you implement the principles with that matters. So we kept one principle. You know, the most important thing for us was getting valuable software frequently in the hands of a consumer. And one of the 12
Mm-hmm.
principles Agile professed some years back. The framework we used to manage the delivery piece was Scrum. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so, and you've probably heard that, as probably as many people have. So we built a structure around 2-week sprints. And the way we were able to get things to market in the hands of consumers very quickly was we had to change the way we developed and built this. You know, if you're going to go into the digital space with changing expectations, consumers that are rapidly evolving, we've all talked about for years that the tech space is changing every other day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure that your delivery piece at least is trying to keep pace with or close pace with everything that's happening around you or outside of you? So 2-week sprints was the mantra. And in those 2 weeks, we went from the story to the details of the business. What do you need to build? Worked the collaboration out on the dev side in week 1, the development side. Week 2, we then worked through the various environments to get it from development into, you know, integration and testing environments through to the business, finalizing the testing on each thing that we were going to build or each, let's say, service to a consumer, to the second Friday where we had what we called the sprint review, which is where the stakeholders come together to ensure that this thing meets the needs that we wanted it to 2 weeks ago. And if all things were done, all bugs and everything else was removed, it was signed off, and that night the environment moved it from its testing environment into production. The Apple Store or the Google Store would approve it, and it was in the hands of a consumer, hopefully within the next 24 to 72 hours. It took us a while. I've got to let you know that it probably took me to lead the team through this 9 months before we could get that cadence right. We had a lot of bumps and bruises along the way because, again, this is more mindset rather than capabilities. But once we got it working, we were somewhere between 15 and 30 features or functions in a vast array of languages were being deployed into markets every 2 weeks. So there's the engagement piece with the executives and all the CEOs.
Yep.
Then there's the capabilities to build a delivery model that can work at the speed that your customers demanded at the end of the day. And there's a lot of other stuff around that. But again, as much as I could say it was smooth sailing, there was 9 months of, I guess, a little bit of pain and suffering to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can tell you is once we got it right, it worked like a well-oiled engine. And we had had markets coming back to us saying, how are you able to do this? How do you do this? Keep it small, keep it simple. The mindset from the business was get rid of everything that's not needed. Just because it's there doesn't mean it doesn't need to stay there. Adhere to your regulations. Don't do anything silly with your compliance. Adhere to both of those through that discipline. But more than anything else, make sure that when it's designed and it comes to life, it's designed for this. It's built for someone that loves it. And last thing I would say here is make sure that you cater for the 65-year-old person on the phone as well as the 22-year-old person on the phone. That's really important.
An extension from that, Troy, that's super, super interesting. An extension from that, obviously that's kind of the build approach, which you've obviously you got the internal team doing a bunch of build. And I think I seem to remember that some of the claims piece had some partnership in there as well. And so was there any, how did you think about partnership helping speed as well as kind of internal culture and delivery process in terms of those two things working together to give you the results you're looking for?
Yeah, great question, mate. So the model we had from a delivery piece was a combined internal team with partners, where we felt that the 1 + 1 = 3. I know mathematics, that doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. The second thing is when you look at claims. So claims typically has 3 parties. You've got the provider, the payer, and the customer. And you could probably add to that if you're going to look at the whole journey from the customer point of view. The customer is not all that worried about when you make a decision. And I know, and I've seen this on so many websites that if there is some reference to a promise, insurers typically go down the path of saying, we will aim to make a decision on the claim within X working days or whatever it may be. For the customer, you're not solving my problem. When I submit a claim to you, after the years of paying premium, I'm submitting a claim because I want the money you owe me. Your policy says to me I'm covered for this. I've just foregone this money, which at this point in time could be, impactful to my ability to pay bills, school fees for kids, whatever else it may be. When are you going to pay me? So we took the stroke of the end to end. The journey wasn't complete until the consumer, from a claims approved point of view, had the money in his or her hands, regardless of methodology. So this is where we also, in each country, work very closely with the banks. Most markets these days have instant pay capabilities. Australia is the same. So when I see websites, it makes me laugh a little bit. There's a couple up in this part of the world where I've seen websites that says, after we make a decision, we promise to pay through the instant pay capability within 3 working days. And I'm like, why do you need 3 working days when the pay's instant? So, I think there's a lot more to be done in that space. And I think coming back to what we started in the conversation with around trust, there's a lot that insurers can do with brilliant people they have within their own organizations just to think differently. And if you need a little bit of help outside, bring some fresh faces, some fresh talent in to help drive that change. Because I've firsthand seen the real impact that has. We had Net Promoter Score upwards of 80 out of 100. Now, Qualtrics and Bain, who came up with some reference to that, years and years ago as a customer metric, would say that that's a world-class outcome. If 8 out of 10 of your customers are saying that they would be willing to promote you and recommend you to their family and friends, that comes back to your first question to me at the start of the call. How do you get growth? Get advocacy. Do brilliant things for the consumers you serve today so that they become your best advocate out there to grow your business. There's nothing better, and particularly in a market like Australia, where friends and family and those social conversations are, hey, listen, you guys should be insured by this company. They're brilliant. I put my claim the other week. I was scratching my head thinking, this could take months. And, couple of days later, I saw the money in my bank account. They sent me a message also just to say, hey, listen, don't worry about the claim. We've taken care of that. Look after yourself. We hope you recover well and give us a shout if you need anything else. As an insurer, our job is to support and protect you through those life changes.
So interesting. And so like pulling it back that full circle in terms of how we framed up the conversation today of is the Australian insurance industry stagnated? We've gone through a bunch of thoughts here around technology, around culture, around process. If you were you take a transformation role in an insurer tomorrow here in an Australian insurer, Troy, like bring that together for me. Like what does that look like? How do you break this stagnation when some of these carriers looking to deliver this transformation? What does that look like? What are those kind of top three pillars that you need to execute on to make the change?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you sit down with the leadership team, the C-suite, and figure out a real ambitious, bold strategy. Where do we want to be? I think Australia, like most markets, are lacking a real leader, dare I say it. Someone that stands out and really not only has something strategically that's bold and ambitious, but it's built into the way they work and every day of driving outcomes for customers, their distribution partners, etc. That becomes the way we do things. And I think, firstly, again, come back to my sporting background. When the coach says to you today, it's about winning by 20 points, the whole team's clear. Everything else is a noise and distraction. That's what we're working towards. Then getting that team in place to go after it. I think getting people to challenge the status quo, I know that term's been around for a long, long while, but getting them also with the empowerment to make the change. You don't have to, have your risk and compliance team scratching their heads going, oh my God, what is this team doing? You can do great things and ensure you adhere to all of the guardrails, both internally and externally, and still deliver brilliant experiences. And I think that is right on the doorstep for the industry. And to your point, so that's two. I think three then, just be honest. Do you have the capabilities to drive the outcomes, or do we need to get some help, augment the team? If our current team is not where they need to be, bring in a couple of fresh faces, bring in a partner externally to help drive those outcomes, because they're all achievable. I've been blessed with the opportunity to see it firsthand, work with an amazing group of people to drive those outcomes and convince people that while most people think it can't be done, when you've got the right team, the right backing and support, anything's possible, I think. And then to your point, it's just the construct underneath, frequent value of delivery, think big, start small. And get the feedback loops. Every time a customer gets something new, listen to your customers, talk to the customers. And then the tech, the digital, your architecture of how you build this moving forward becomes responsive to that. And last but least, I think you'll find people will just enjoy more out of the work. They'll be happier. I'm getting comments from people saying, you guys are off the charts. I'm hearing that, this company is doing brilliant. Customers who were hating you, not liking you, or just talking about the industry in such negativity have done a 180. Don't underestimate the power that one brand can have to change that.
Troy, that is so inspirational. And we are only 50% in. Hey, everybody, I hope you enjoyed part one, because there is part two to come. And in part two, we're going to be looking at building customer trust, an extension of what we just started a little bit today, and then going a little bit deeper into technology, into platforms, and then how do you become a really valued partner for your customers. And so, Troy, thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant. I'm excited for what's to come. And so thank you so much for your time.
No, Nigel, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully there's a small nugget of something that can help someone out there to do some great stuff.
There absolutely is. And so thanks everybody at home. To watch the video version of the episode, head over to our YouTube channel. The link will be in the description. And if you want to hear from any more of the industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries in insurance, just like Troy is over in Singapore. Check out the other episodes of our podcast series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer, and jump on a LinkedIn, Twitter. Make sure you shout me a note if you want to ask any questions. Troy, thanks again. Looking forward to part 2.